Empower your leadership journey with the CEO Series. Whether you're at the gym, strolling, or commuting, our impactful dialogues with world-class leaders are just a click away. Immerse yourself in the minds of visionaries shaping today's most influential companies and innovations. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership. Don't miss out. Available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms.
Good morning, good evening, depending upon what part of the world you're in. If it's Friday, it is the CEO Series. We bring together leaders from across the globe, and they share their leadership, they share their career journey with us. So today we are honored to have a very dear friend, long time, Jonathan Chernes, who's built an impressive career in marketing and management, Senior Vice President of Retail at Martha Stewart, where we met, played a key role in shaping one of America's most recognizable brands. He has held leadership positions at Rolling Stone, Travel and Leisure, House and Garden, House Beautiful. Beyond that, into the entrepreneurial journey, he co-founded Lavish Body Home, a high-end skincare and home accessories boutique that expanded into a full-service salon. Now he's the faculty lead of training and development facilitator at Southern New Hampshire University. Amazing careers. So with that, I want to welcome my friend Jonathan. How are you, man?
Thank you, Ron. I'm good. I kind of had to laugh with the title, Corporate Leader to Educational Guru. Guru's a kind of an overstatement, and I'm most unwilling corporate leader ever. So reluctance the word, but thank you. It's good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, you said reluctant, but there's a lot of learnings that came about from that, and we'll dig into that just a little bit. So all of the MSLO alumni that are here, hello everyone, because I know a lot of people. Martha folks, walk us through that journey. 30 years of experience. Of all of those levels of career. When I got to Martha Stewart, you were senior vice president of whatever it was, and you and I were there, kind of cross over the same time. And now you're developing, or you're executive team lead for at the university. Walk us through that. How do you get there?
Sure. Well, it all started. I went to school I grew up in Connecticut in the Northeast. I went to Central Connecticut State University for my undergrad. I was this shy of getting a dual BA, but my BA is in mass communications. I was one course shy of a BA in theater. I really wanted to be an actor at one point. The problem with that is you need talent. So I realized I needed to figure out how to make money. And I say reluctant corporate leader because I never wanted to be the suit and tie guy behind a desk. That was I wanted to avoid that like the plague. And so I was in the communications field. I was really studying videography. I thought I'd get into video journalism, news. I interned at WFSB News in Hartford, did that. So my background was mass communications and theater. And my senior year of the year I graduated college, that senior summer, I ended up working at this theater arts camp in upstate New York, which has been around forever, Stage Door Manor, a lot of famous folks. Of course, now I can't remember any. Went there as campers, but I worked there. But the reason I bring that up is I met a lot of a lot of working professionals who were either actors, directors, videographers, etc. And working with them all summer, they were like, "Oh yeah, you should move to New York. There's plenty of work." So finished that summer and ended up in New York City, where I did work in theater for 2 years, and again realized I needed to make money. So I answered an ad in the Village Voice. Remember the Village Voice? And
yes, is that still around?
I don't know. I haven't lived in New York in 15 years, so I'm not sure. But I answered an ad in the Village Voice for a production assistant at Rolling Stone magazine and got the job. And basically I was running the stat room, which doesn't even exist anymore. But when they used to do mechanical boards and paste up boards, somebody had to make photo enlargements of the images for the paste up boards and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I was doing. But I was fortunate in, while I was at Rolling Stone, it was really Us magazine, which was owned by Rolling Stone. But while I was there, I learned all about print production and print manufacturing, because that was also the role of the production assistant. So for those of you who may or may not know out there, whenever any magazine that you see is printed in 4 colors, and you have to go on press and balance those colors to make sure what you're seeing looks like what it's meant to look like.
Yeah.
So I trained in that. At this also, this novelty item called desktop publishing started. And we were trained using Quark, which was the software at the time used in desktop. And Us Magazine actually was the first consumer print publication that was 100% produced on desktop. So at that time. So basically, I got a great education in my first job in the whole world of print and publishing, and that started me on this trajectory in the publishing arena. So I was at Rolling Stone for about 4 years, and I left there to work at it was a blip. I worked for a design firm for about 8 months and realized that wasn't for me, and went back to publishing. I was at Travel and Leisure magazine, worked my way up to associate managing editor there. I then went to, and it's funny because my grandfather used to say, "John, can't you hold a job?" Because I went from Rolling Stone to Travel and Leisure to House and Garden, and then to Martha, because when in the publishing industry in the 90s, you moved ahead by moving magazines. So I ended up at House and Garden because I wanted to work with Robert Priest, who was a known graphic designer and creative director at the time. So I got to work with him, and I wanted to work for Condé Nast because at that time they were, the publishing mecca. And I was there for a couple of years. Prior to that, sorry to step back, Stephen Drucker, who was the editor-in-chief of Martha Stewart in the early 90s, recommended me for a job. He and I had worked together at Travel and Leisure, and that's where I got to know him. And when the creative director at Martha, Gail Towie, was looking for somebody to help manage the art department, Stephen threw my hat in the ring, and I ended up at Martha. So I was originally hired at Martha to help manage the art department, creating schedules, creating timelines, working backwards to get projects moving so that we could hit our goals. I was also tapped to help with the whole color print process on that end, making sure, again, using my print background in that role. And so I was primarily on the magazine when I first got to Martha. And while, as you remember, Martha at the time was sort of 3 main areas: television, print, and retail merchandise. So while I was working on the magazine in print, the retail merchandise program was taking off. And at that time, it was just soft goods, sheets, towels, bathroom accessories, that kind of stuff. Yes. And so that was being managed in-house. The design work was being done out of house by design firm Doyle Partners. And so it was a marriage of inside and outside resources putting together the home program at Kmart. Well, then they got the garden program. And that was a whole other 1,000 SKUs of goods and items, and Gail needed somebody to help manage that. So she asked me if I would want to work on the garden program. So I said, sure, why not? So I left the magazine side of the business and moved over to the retail side of the business and started working with Corinne Brome in the creative services division. And what we did in that arena was we did all of the packaging, signage, collateral, marketing materials, and that from pamphlets to flyers to brochures to TV commercials, you name it, we were producing it. Not all in-house, but we were the main facilitators making that all happen. So Corrine was on the soft good line, I was on the garden line. Corrine left after a little while, and I was promoted into her role and kind of oversaw all of that. So soft goods was going, garden was going. We picked up home goods and started doing cookware, dinnerware, dishes, all that kind of stuff. We took on baby. So the whole Kmart program was really under the purview of our division. And towards the end of my tenure there, because of attrition, I got promoted into the VP role of that arena and ran that for about 8 months before I departed. And that's so that was how I was introduced to the marketing world and the retail merchandise world.
Well, you know what I find interesting about that. So you're in education now. You're developing leaders and you're developing people for their careers. And I always, I teach at a couple of universities, and I say, what you're projecting to, it's not going to happen that way. And always be aware that you're going to make a lot of crooks and turns. So as you walk through that, it was so many of those challenges that had come up. And you said that your father said, can you keep a job? Because, you keep changing. And I'm thinking you're supposed to stay on a career path. So if you were to encapsulate all of that, how do you talk to your students to talk about careers? Because you've had an amazing career. First of all, you've made 3 major transformations. This is what I'm counting 3. How would you talk to a group of students?
So I teach marketing. I've been teaching as an adjunct since 2005, first at Parsons in New York City, then for the University of Scranton, Pennsylvania, and now for Southern New Hampshire University. And I've always taught marketing and management courses. Primarily the last 5 or 6 years, I've focused on marketing, and the course I teach is optimizing brands. And the last week of the course, we talk about you, the brand, right? Because we're always about branding, but how you are a brand and how you need to market yourself in today's day and age. And so what I tell my students is, number one, whether you want to be a marketer or whether you had to take this course because it was, part of a requirement, the skills translate. You have to be a good communicator. You have to learn tact. You have to learn diplomacy. You have all these skills inherent in this role, but don't let the role pigeonhole you, because those skills can translate into any arena. So you may want to be a marketer, but think outside the box. You don't have to work at an ad agency. You don't have to work in a marketing agency. Hospitals have communication and marketing departments. Every arena has an avenue where they need the skill set that you have. So don't pigeonhole yourself, number one. And then number two, I'm reminded of a quote by, oh my God, I just blanked on his name, Richard Branson, who always said, if somebody offers you an opportunity and you're not sure if you should take it, jump on it, learn how to do the job later. And I've always just kind of done that. I mean, when we bought our business, we didn't start, just to clarify, we didn't start Lavish and Body and Home. 2 friends of ours, a husband and wife, actually started that business. But we helped them with the marketing aspects of it. My husband's a graphic designer, creative director. I had the marketing sense. So we would always help them with their advertising and with, blah, blah, blah. And after about 5 years that they had the business, they wanted to go into something else. And that was around the same time we were looking to get out of New York City. So we were like, what if we buy their business? And that's what we did. And it's like, I mean, I worked in retail at Martha, but I never ran a retail business. Okay. And back to your question, and that quote by Branson, it's like, I don't cut hair. We don't cut hair. Don't know anything about cutting hair. We decided to open a hair salon. It seemed to make sense. And we hired the right people and brought them in. But bottom line is, don't pigeonhole yourself. Skills are translatable. Don't put yourself in a box. Be open to opportunities.
It's amazing that you said that. You talked about the brand. I did a session a few days ago with an HR group, and because my background comes there, and I said, everyone is the CEO of you. whether that be trying to find, what is your strategy to find another position? How do you rebrand yourself? I said, you're in charge of that. And I think one of the things that's missing, and I always talk to this when I talk to students, is that you have to realize you're in charge. And you're going to have to figure it out in some kind of a way. So when you think of all of the situation that you've been in and how you were able to navigate that, can you teach that, or can someone be there to say, you know what, Jonathan said this, you referenced Richard Branson, so someone 5 years from now will say, Jonathan mentioned in this class that you should do XYZ. So when we think about that, how big of an issue how big of an issue is it for leaders like yourself to develop the next level of leaders, whether that be retail, marketing, branding, whatever it is?
Well, I think, I think some skills are innate. I mean, some people are just born with, the gift of the gab, or the, whatever it is. And so I think there are those skills that come naturally. I think some things can be taught. You can learn time management. You can be taught hard skills, but I think, some of the other has to be developed. And in the role that I have now, Southern New Hampshire University, just to talk about what I do now currently, we have 10,000 adjunct faculty members across the country. And I work in a division of faculty support where we have team leads who help ensure the quality of the work of the instructors in the classroom. So, and there's 250 or so and growing team leads that we work with. We mentor them. We work with them to ensure that what they're seeing is accurate. We foster them in terms of developing their eye for quality in the work and the things to look for. So I think that there are certain hard skills that you can teach, and then those other skills that are sort of innate, you work to develop those in people as you work with them. And I saw that a lot with people like Leah Buffa and Gina Gargiulo and all the folks that I worked with who I adore at Martha Stewart. They were really, really awesome. They were an awesome team, and they were really organized. Their skill set of keeping timelines, keeping the trains running, facilitating the needs of the many different departments that we had to pull together to execute was a great experience, in that I could see the skills that they had already, and then we would work together and just look at things like diplomacy and managing up and down, because you had to manage all the way up to Martha, let alone managing the folks that worked for you on your team. So, and those are the kind of things that you kind of coach to develop and try to teach. Yeah.
So I want to give my personal note, because my role in any organization is I'm going to say pre-COVID, I always want to walk the floor. I want to walk the floor, get out of the office, walk the floor to talk to people. And one of the things I notice about you, and this is what always kind of synced in to looking at your style, was that in the mornings, you would always have a lot of people gathered around your door. It wasn't a business meeting. It was just chatting. It was building relationships. And then you found some leaders that no one was ever there at their door, but they always said, my door's always open. So there was that kind of a style that you had that caused people to gravitate towards you. I've interviewed quite a few of Martha people, and your name always kind of pops up in conversation. And you were kind of leading that. Did they teach you that in acting school, or was that just something that was there? So
Ron, I was just acting like I knew what I was doing.
Acting like you knew what you were doing. So where did that come? Where did that come from? What was a significant influence in your career that empathy piece was there, that people felt comfortable coming in, getting a chair, and just chatting?
A colleague of yours once told me that I coddled my employees, and at first I took that as an insult. But as I grew, and as I realized, it's not coddling your employees. It's called servant leadership, right? You want to make sure your team can be the best they can be. You put the needs of your team first. And that's sort of how I approach it. I knew these kids. I say kids because they were all right out of college, really, at the time, most of them
Yeah.
anyway. They were working their butts off, and it wasn't easy work. They, photo shoots would start at the crack of dawn at Martha's house and would go until after dinner. And
Yeah.
people were working hard, and they deserved to be heard, to be respected. It was grunt work, a lot of it. So I was there to listen to them and to see wherever they had problems or challenges or roadblocks, to be able to help them. I talk about the innate skills and things like that. I was a crossing guard in elementary school. I was a camp counselor. I was, the best uncle my little cousins ever had. I was always, taking that kind of role, sort of mentor, peer coach,
Yeah.
Facilitator. So it seemed to come naturally to me. So in terms of Martha and keeping my door open and things like that, at the end of the day, we were all executing these amazing projects, and morale was important.
Yeah. It was an amazing. It was the most amazing experience for me in my journey. It was the best 9-10 years of my life. I learned so much there, and I was able to translate that into what I'm doing now, kind of across the globe. You mentioned coddling, and the reason I pull that word out is because the majority of my work now is with leadership teams, CEOs, boards, and all those kinds of things. And so this has kind of come up in a different kind of vernacular, the coddling piece. But it's about, how do you become that servant leader? How do you listen to people? How do you become away from the manager's role to direct, and listen to what your people are going through? So I'm going to come back to the question I was going to ask. Where did that come from? You mentioned the jobs that you had. If you had to think of a person or a group of people, what caused that? Who had a significant influence in your career? Is that a person, or what would it be?
I think, I mentioned my grandfather. My grandfather, Zalman Scott, was he was not an educated man. But he had a good heart, and he was a career waiter. He waited tables his entire adult life. He had a strong work ethic, and in high school and college, I worked at the same restaurant with him. I was a busboy, worked my way up to waiter, helped pay for college, all that kind of stuff. But my grandfather, he never complained. He worked hard. He provided for his family, including me. My folks were divorced in the late 60s. They had me when they were 19. By the time I was 2, they were divorced. So my mom and I lived with my grandparents. So I saw my grandfather day in and day out, and how hard he worked. And I really think that instilled, that solid foundation in terms of my work ethic, because I've always just done whatever needs to be done. In fact, part of working with that team and talking about everyone around my office and things like that was biggest challenge for me was learning how to delegate, because I always just did it.
Yeah.
So I think that I would have to say, that sort of background, growing up with my grandfather, working in the restaurant business, seeing how hard he worked, the impact he made on people. They always remembered him, whether it was customers, coworkers, the owners of the restaurant, etc. So I think that really instilled a lot in me.
So in making those shifts from acting to working in a business, but I'm going to learn something from that. If you had to look back over those milestones, was there a key point that you learned from all of those trajectories or detours or whatever you'd want to call it?
I think that part of it, some of it is happenstance. Like I said, being at the right place at the right time certainly helps, but also taking responsibility and making plans and making decisions is key. I knew at one point, or I felt at one point, that, as I said, I never wanted to be the suit and tie executive sitting behind the desk. And I think that I was at a bar mitzvah talking to some distant cousins, and one of them was a college professor, my cousin Lynn's husband, Jeff. and he was telling me about his experience as a college professor. And I told him that I always thought I would enjoy teaching. And we had this amazing conversation. And I said, yeah, but I can never be a college professor. I don't have a PhD, et cetera, et cetera. He's like, you really only need a master's for a lot of universities. I was like, oh, okay. And, so I went down the path of getting my master's because I knew I wanted to teach eventually.
Wow.
I didn't know
okay.
where, I didn't know how, I didn't know what, and this was right in 2003-ish. I got my master's at the end of 2004, 2005, I think it was. So, I put that plan in place to kind of try to make a path for myself. So I don't know if that really answers your question in terms of what I've learned, but I think what I found is that you have to, if you want change, you have to make change, and you have to make the choices. And that again translated too into buying a retail store and deciding I'm going to leave going to leave New York City and live outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania, and do that. So I think that setting a path for yourself is important as well.
You mentioned that I'm in human resources / leadership development, and one of the passions that I've had is because of the fact that I wanted to build a next level of HR people based on what I have been exposed to, this old way of doing things, and trying to serve out leadership, listening to your workforce, to design solutions and all of those kinds of things. But that came back from being exposed to something that I said I don't want to be a part of, but I knew where it was going to be headed. So the question I wanted to ask is that as you shift from corporate to education, were there some key grounding factors that you brought to the table into this new role?
Grounding factors.
Well, I say grounding factors. You learned so much from acting, and you were able to come in on the ground floor of Martha Stewart or the other companies and were to work your way up. And now you're moving into a totally different realm.
Well, I think much in the way that you, when you just said that you wanted to develop new leaders in a different way, because when I was, and clearly I didn't become an actor, so we won't say that was successful. But while I was in college, there was a particular director who I worked with, he had a good career, and I judged him at the time unjustly, but I was a bratty college kid. What did I know? And I'm like, you're directing here at a college. Did you ever do Broadway? Did you ever do this? What do you know? That kind of attitude. And but it clicked something in my head that when I wanted to teach, and especially as I started looking into marketing or becoming a marketer and starting marketing, I wanted to bring some real world experience. I felt the classroom was missing real world experience in all the courses that I had been through before. And there's that kind of snide comment, those who can't do teach or whatever, but which I don't necessarily agree with, but I did want to bring that real world experience into the classroom. So the marketing courses that I have worked on, when I got my master's in Parsons, and the chair of the media department asked if I would be interested in creating a course and teaching there. That's how I got on this path. So they asked me to develop a course on new product development, which I did. So I taught new product development for 3 or 4 terms, and then they asked me to pick up a management course. So I taught managing creative projects and teams. And I would bring my classes to field trips to Martha Stewart and show that, this is what it's like in the real world and all that kind of stuff. So I think, foundationally, it was easy to take my career experience and move it into the direction of, marketing and management courses, but where the real world experience could really carry through and bring the content to life for the learners.
That's amazing that you were able to bring those learnings into this new realm. I didn't know that you had done all of that in education. I thought that maybe it was just a sideline that you had moved into. Has your leadership style changed over the years?
I think I have gotten a lot more laissez-faire, I guess. Again, it goes back to that comment about being able to delegate. I wanted to do everything myself in the past. And so making that shift, I have an amazing director now, Allison Tufts, who is always telling us to work smarter, not harder. So finding ways to do that and to encourage that with our teams and the people we work with is always at the forefront of our conversations.
So with so much innovation going through in today's climate, I don't care what industry you're in, how do you stay abreast of what's happening? How does Jonathan learn? How does Jonathan stay in the game?
I was laughing with my colleagues, Jeff and Rhett, about this the other day because they are like voracious readers. They're always on the latest management book or the latest this and I don't read at all. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Let me clarify. I mean, I've read Good to Great. I've done the leadership books. I've read, Branson's autobiography, Guy Kawasaki, Seth Godin. So I've done my share of reading. But for the last 15 years, I read pages of students' papers. That's enough reading.
Okay.
But that said, to stay current, I mean, in my role now, we are talking a lot about storytelling, and it's funny you had Leah on not too long ago, and she is all about storytelling, and I really appreciate the path she has taken and her advocacy work and all of that. But we are really looking at using storytelling as a tool to work with our teams now. So right now I'm reading, storybook branding. I'm reading organizational storytelling. So I'm looking at things like that to bring those into what I'm doing now. Otherwise, while we had a retail business, I was reading trade publications, just to make sure I knew what was going on in the world of soap. So trade publications there, in my role now, I'm on all kinds of email articles, email lists of articles for faculty focus, faculty education, and teaching. So I'm reading, those kinds of things daily and keeping abreast, and social media.
That's one of the key questions I will always ask leaders, and so it's got to be framed as. So tell me what you're reading. Tell me about an interesting article you read recently, and what did you pull from that? Because here's what I found: once someone reaches that top level, they say, "I don't need to learn anymore. I've kind of reached that pedestal, and I'm pretty much there." But I say, in today's climate versus years ago, you have to read, listen, podcast, whatever it is, and it's the same thing you're talking about, because you started the conversation was that don't really read, but as you walk through that, you say, "Well, I learned from here."
I love the job I have right now because I get to look at the classrooms of hundreds of faculty members annually. So I get to see what they're doing, and I learn from them all the time. Obviously, I'm in an online environment, right? I live in Florida. My school's in New Hampshire. We have faculty all across the country. We have learners from all over the world. So I learn from my team every day. I learn from our faculty members every day. I learn from the 4 folks I work with every day. So there's always education happening, whether it's articles, books, or whatever. I'm more interested in seeing the effectiveness of how people are communicating to their students, how they're getting through in this sort of relationship, and then looking at the data. We pull reports, we see faculty satisfaction reports, so we know what they're looking for, what they need. Our team leads who work directly with us, they, after every term, provide feedback so that we can always enhance and improve what we're putting out there for them. So there's that kind of learning going on all the time as well. So who has time for books?
Who has time for books? You know what you mentioned that you say you pull reports. That's the same as you were doing at Martha Stewart. Look at pulling reports from products, pulling reports from product line. So it's kind of the same way, and it's called an evidence-based approach. I'm looking at the numbers will tell me or guide me in some kind of direction. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, data informs you. As I said, in marketing, everybody always assumes I want to get into marketing. I love being in advertising, or I want to be Darren Stevens from Bewitched. And the funny thing is, it's like marketing is so much more than just creating an amazing ad, because you need to have the data to tell you why that ad is going to work, why it's going to be effective, what is,
Yeah.
so learning about your target audience, learning about your target market, understanding their wants and needs, understanding their behavior. Marketing's a lot of psychology, and
Yeah.
everything we do, our day-to-day is a lot about psychology, in working
Yeah.
with our students, with working with our faculty members, and with working with our team leads. And so having their feedback and understanding their wants and needs is key to be successful.
The Darren Stephen quote kind of took me back a bit.
When I was a kid, I always thought he and Mike Brady had the coolest jobs. They were in advertising.
Yeah, so that kind of helped as you were beginning the formation of moving in what you're doing. But that kind of took me back. But man, I'm like, Darren, Bewitched. Oh my goodness, this goes back a ways. So
yeah, I'm old, Ron.
What's that?
I'm old.
You're not old. You're not old. You're just referencing a point in time. Let's put it that way. You're referencing a point in time.
Yeah. So
so we talked about that. We talked about how do you stay ahead of that. If you could go back to your younger self, that aspiring actor that was looking at the Oscars and all those kinds of, what advice would you give that person? Because you've gone through a lot of different changes, but you've always been able to land on your feet. What advice would you give to the younger Jonathan?
My team's going to laugh at me. Learn Spanish. I wish I had learned Spanish. I learned French, and I don't even remember it. And it's only because in 8th grade, we got to go to Quebec. So I wish I learned Spanish. I always go back to that. But no, I wish I had learned earlier to delegate. I wish I wasn't so hard on myself. I'm my own worst critic, and I probably could work on my self-esteem, but but I think that's really just what advice. Don't sweat the small stuff. Really, it is just like, again, going back to, I'm more hard on myself than anyone has ever been on me. So I need to let go of that. We're always doing this. Let go.
Yeah.
Learn to let go.
Yeah. It's easier said than done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A technique I use, and I just wrote I have an article coming out about that, is reflection. I tend to reflect. I'll reflect after this call and said, what other questions could I possibly have asked? If I've got a Zoom call that's coming up, I reflect at the end of the day, at the end of an event, and at the end of the week. Look back on the week, what worked, what didn't work, and I call it the 3 W's: what worked, what didn't work, and what could I do differently if I had to do it over again. That's just me. So we understand.
I promise you. I tell my colleague Dee and I always joke, because I was like, when I was in the shower, I was thinking, and I assure you, later when I'm in the shower, I'm going to be running this whole interview in my head, wondering what I could have said differently or why you asked me to do this.
Yeah. Those reflection point. You mentioned the shower, and I gave a speech at some conference, and they said, my most informative way of viewing things, ideas always come to me in the shower. I said, whoa, how long is that shower? Does it last over a period of time? But you look at these kinds of things. So one of the articles that I'm writing is about that, and how do you reflect? Because I watched the Super Bowl the other week, not big a sports fan, but I watched it because one of the players on the Philadelphia team, when he comes off the field, he's reading a book. And he's always reading a book. And they said, how do you read a book with all the stuff going on? He said, I have to pull away from it and I have to reflect. I'm like, wow, never heard that before.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I didn't know that. I didn't see that.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched the game, but I didn't notice that.
In other words, it's saying, how do you pull away from what you're dealing with and reflect so when he goes back out, he says, my mind is clear when I go back on the field and doing those kind of things. So I said, can we use it as kind of a technique? It may not be, we're not on the sidelines of a Super Bowl with all that pressure, but how do we, after that team meeting, was a team meeting fruitful? How can I change the team dynamics of the people that's reporting into me? And you're managing teams. Do you ever reflect on how can I get better at doing this? How can I get my team better?
Oh, I'm always thinking about how I could have done something better in the moment. But, we work, for being remote workers, we are constantly, my team and I, are constantly talking to each other. And every time we're working on a project, every time we have a town hall where we invite all of our team leads to meet with us, or we host drop-in sessions, we debrief after every one, and we talk about how it went, what we learned, what could have gone better, what we should have been prepared for, what questions we should bring up, what questions were raised that we need to focus on in outreach to clarify, or to, so there's always a lot of reflection going on as a team. And again, me being, like I said, I'm my own worst critic, so I'm always looking back at how I handled situations, or and how I could have approached it differently, better, worse maybe, and just learning from that exchange.
So the question I want to ask you is that if you were giving a keynote and you had all so-called C-suite big shots sitting in the office, and you were sharing to them insights about managing this new level of worker that's coming in, this new dynamics of a workforce is totally different than when we came along. You're mentioning the Bewitched or whatever it was, and doing. What key points would you want to leave with the future and aspiring leaders? You're now at that role, but you have a new customer coming in. What advice would you give the so-called big shots?
I would tell them that they need to remember, a lot of people when they're first starting out, they're looking for immediate gratification, but they're looking for money, they're looking for prestige, they're looking for promotion, they're looking for growth, and that they might not realize it at the time, but those things become less and less important as the driving motivation for what you do, right? Because once you start, obviously everyone takes a job because they want to make money and they want to, grow in their career, whatever. But that drive that is for one reason starting out changes over time. And just because you as the CEO have this focus, and you expect everyone in the company to have that focus, they don't. They have what's in front of them at the time. And you need to be able to understand that, listen to them. Again, it goes back to that whole, why is my door always open and why are people hanging around my office? You want to be able to understand what their needs are and what their motivations are in order to keep them happy, keep the work productive, build those teams, build that morale, and need to understand that. And I think that, when you have, obviously, Martha's a busy person and isn't going to be able to do that or take the time to do that, but that's why you have the B suite of people in there to help manage the day-to-day and motivate the day-to-day. And that they need to be aware of that and acknowledge that.
Yeah, I sent Martha a note that you were going to be on, so I hope she's listening.
Oh, hey, Martha. I haven't spoken to her in years. Gosh.
Oh my goodness. Well, every time she comes to the bar, she and I will always have dinner, and we'll chat about all the old times and all those kind of things. So kind of built the relationship later in life as we kind of going through those things. So as we come up to the end of the show, one of the reasons that we started the CEO series post-COVID was to try and get leaders like yourselves who've gone through trajectories and all these kinds of things, but you've always tend to bounce back. You learn from here, and you keep moving forward. And thank you for being a guest to share that journey. In closing thoughts, were there anything that you would like to leave for your students or next level of leaders? What group of what lessons would you like to leave to them?
I'm repeating myself, but I really believe this. It's don't put yourself in a box. Your skills can translate into any field, and especially today when there's a lot of uncertainty around jobs and all the changes that are going on and politically and stuff. What field you're in now may not be the field you'll be in tomorrow, but again, keep an open mind and learn how to channel the skills into whatever area that presents an opportunity, and don't be afraid of the opportunity.
Yeah. Going back to the Richard Branson quote.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which connects to that. So in closing, what are you most excited about? I mean, you've got your job, you're doing things. What are you What are you excited about?
You know what? I've only been in this role for 7 months. So, I've been teaching with Southern New Hampshire University for over 10 years or about 10 years. But I only became a full-time staff member in June. So
Okay.
I'm relatively the new kid on the block. And so every day is exciting to me. Working with this great group, working with our faculty. I really believe in the mission of the school, making education available to all. And so, yeah, it's who knows what's going to happen next. We're growing in terms of enrollments and in terms of team leads and the staff, not staff, but the people on our teams. So I'm excited every day about showing up and doing the work.
Okay. One of my learnings because I do two adjunct roles, is that I want to share with them what the real world is like. And I'm not saying this as a dig to college professors and all those kinds of things, but I come out of the real world. I could have come to this class tonight and I could have done an offsite with a board of directors. I could have done an offsite with a C-suite. So I think for people like us, and this is just between kind of people who've worked in corporate and then moved into education, we bring a lot more to the table. Let me rephrase that so somebody may come in to say, I think we bring a different angle to the table because we've done it in real life and we can share those stories versus being the academic. Did I say that the right way? I don't want to get any emails or calls later to say.
I think that any way that you can bring the material to life, the content to life, whatever you're teaching. I mean, not if it's skills like brain surgery, obviously you can't fake that.
Yeah.
But anytime, and I try to do this in my coursework, anytime I can take course concepts on marketing, material, whatever is being taught in any given week, and bring real world examples to the table, bring that material to life for the learner, either through my experience, through current events, what's going on, I do read, headlines in the newspapers and stuff like that. So, seeing I skim. But seeing, being aware of what's going on in the world and how the concepts that you're trying to teach students are brought to life in a real meaningful, tangible way, that's key. So I think that I try to do that in my courses all the time. And I think too, again, going back to the storytelling element, I think we're trying to bring that into what we do day to day with our team and our folks who are out there to try to bring examples to life for them so they get a better understanding of the things we're looking for or the expectations that the school has for them and things of that nature.
Okay, cool. I want to do a quick shout out before we close out. Marva Keys, Mars, who's a friend, she says self-reflection seems to be the order of the day. She loves this. Peter Piccinini, who says a great way to start a weekend, always is a listener who was a former guest, started in theater, and now he's into wealth management. See how that goes?
Wow.
He started in theater, now he's into wealth management. Mohammed Ashraf says that's great. In the show, so Jonathan, thank you so much. Hang on for a minute as we close out, because I wanted to speak to you offline.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ron. I appreciate this.
Okay, cool.
Take the CEO series with you anywhere, anytime. All episodes are now available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and major streaming platforms. It's not just an interview. It's a masterclass in leadership.